All right. Let's see if it works. Let's wait for a couple of people to hop in. We'll see what it goes. I'm expecting Jonathan, my friend, to also join in if he's around. So we'll set. If not, we'll just do the solo. And give it 5 minutes and we'll launch it, baby. Um, I'm gonna try to do this in a more interactive manner than usual. Perhaps even you know give some people the ability to speak if anyone wants to ask questions, um, stuff like that. I'm not sure how that's actually done. I've never done a spaces like an interactive whatever. So I'm gonna figure it out. So apparently there's co-hosts, there's speakers. I can invite speakers, and then apparently I can also invite co-hosts. Let's try it. Let's give it. Let's give it a shot. Okay. Mm. So I guess this is also done with the hand raising thing. Communication through emotes and emojis. Yeah. uh, very good. All right, we'll just get right into it, and I'll go into a sort of like a Q&A thing, and we'll somehow manage to do it. So we're launching a new sort of, I guess, a series of spaces. Um, for now, as the temporary name, we're calling it the Pursuit of Truth. Can someone confirm, by the way, if you guys can hear me well? Just give me an emoji or something. If you can hear me okay. I'd appreciate that. Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. Um, wonderful, wonderful. Um, so the idea and the plan for today was to touch a couple of subjects. Um, the general idea is, of course, practical knowledge as before. And I want to talk a little bit about mm, what's going on in the world and sort of like because most of the questions that are coming in usually have to do with you know what's going on, what am I doing, what is my purpose, that type of thing. A lot of people seem to be going through these same like challenges and questions, um and I want to impart not knowledge, but I guess I want to share my experience with all of you and share with you what I'm planning um for the foreseeable future. um Now, sort of like the status quo and the default state of the world right now is that it's in this sort of weird limbo, where it's stuck in this transitional period. And as all transitional periods are, um, this is a time of great confusion. And most of the events, um, most of the things that will occur in the near future, it will only serve to deepen this feeling of confusion. And I've been talking about this for a number of months now. This was inevitably on the horizon. And those with a good intuitive sense for things also sort of like inherently understand this. So if you are someone who's, like I say, spiritually inclined, oh, there's Jonathan. Let me make you a co-host, brother. Um, 1 second, everyone. So invite to speak, invite to co-host. There we go. Um, he'll accept it when he can, most likely. But we basically want to talk about several topics that we feel people could benefit from and actual gain practical knowledge, and not only well converse about these topics, but also sort of like announce something as well. Um, we have decided, I guess, to create a sort of small society. I don't want to call it a community. I don't want to call it a club. I don't want to call it anything. Um, a sort of um, humanitarian um, society um, that will largely focus on not the standard, spiritual sort of like learnings and practices, rationale, so to speak, but focused on the creation of, how to say, um, post confusion art, um, and creation of new ideas and sort of like philosophies. I believe this is important for a myriad of reasons. Um, I believe it's important to have a network of people, especially with the times that are coming, um, who will sort of like be able to study what I call the art of quiet living. um, because, like we said, and I know I'm being very broad here, but this is for by design. There's going to be a lot of confusion, and there's going to be a lot of confused people. There's going to be a lot of people who rage at the world due to this confusion. There's going to be a lot of people with unstable emotional sort of like states. Um, and if you wish to sort of, well, come out alive um, of all this confusion, right? And by alive, I don't mean, living. I mean, um, sane. Um, then you'll have to readjust your views on the world, and you'll probably have to readjust your expectations about, well, what this world is and sort of like where you are. General understanding is this: the only thing that can sort of like show you the light at the end of the tunnel in times of great confusion, the only thing is intuition. I've spoken about this in the past as well. The problem with that is that, well, firstly, your intuition has been significantly and severely dampened by all kinds of filth that we consume or are forced to consume. And secondly, and maybe even more importantly, you have removed yourself from your intuitive senses. And these intuitive senses, they're very difficult to bring forth for the average person because they have been, well, programmed and raised to, um, well, they don't even know that it exists, right? There are spiritual aspects, there are intuitive faculties that you don't even know um, exist. Actually, let me, Jonathan, drop me a message, man, if you have trouble sort of like speaking, because
Hi.
oh,
I
hello.
just wanted to let you
Right.
finish there,
Yeah,
and
okay, welcome, man.
thank you. Yeah. So, hello to everyone here who has joined. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And I want to open up with a quote from the Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And a man said, "Speak to us of self knowledge." And he answered, saying, "Your hearts know in silence the secrets of the days and the nights, but your ears thirst for the sound of your heart's knowledge. You would know in words that which you have always known in thought. You would touch with your fingers the naked body of your dreams. and it is well you should. The hidden wellspring of your soul must needs rise and run murmuring to the sea, and the treasure of your infinite depths would be revealed to your eyes. But let there be no scales to weigh your unknown treasure, and not seek the depths of your knowledge with staff or sounding line. For self is a sea boundless and measureless. Say not, I have found truth, but rather, I have found a truth. Say not, I have found the path of the soul. Say rather, I have met the soul walking upon my path. For the soul walks upon all paths. The soul walks not upon a line, neither does it grow like a reed. The soul unfolds itself like a lotus of countless petals.
Beautiful, sir. This is Jonathan, everyone. Him and I are basically new friends, so to speak,
Yeah.
and we've decided to host these spaces, not how I usually would in the past, where I just have this monologue, but for us to have conversations, for us to share in the beauty of art and writing, the beauty of spiritual pursuits, the pursuit of truth. There's no topic we cannot touch. Might also have differing opinions on, some things, which is normal. Um, and we want to sort of create a collective around the idea of not isolating ourselves and sort of like trying to live selfishly our best lives, but to understand how to collectively embrace the idea of collective enlightenment. Well, firstly, collective awakening, but then collective enlightenment. We are, or I guess we sort of decided to be more pragmatic about it and more results orientated and action orientated. As you all know, um, my approach with esoteric study and the mystical tradition, and just general with all of the arts, um, is one of rational and practical use. So that which has no function i- within our material realm, to me, uh, it doesn't matter as much, right? Knowledge has to be applicable to action. It has to be actionable knowledge and actionable wisdom. So, yeah, man, Jonathan, what do you think? What do you think we should talk
Mm.
about today, man? Or do you maybe even
Well,
want people to ask us questions?
well, in the first instance, I think we should focus on the title. So, the pursuit of truth. So, what is truth? And one of the best bits of advice that I was ever given was the importance of honesty. And that isn't just the honesty of when we think that, oh, I'm being an honest person here, I'm not lying. Of course, what is the measure of a lie? And if one is really seeking the truth, then one must, first of all, know oneself in order to then be able to speak the truth, to seek it. And the ego, which we all have, and there's many people that talk of, oh, we must destroy the ego, remove the ego. And of course, these are all um, important things at a certain stage with a certain focus, but the ego will always be part of our being and our dynamic operating in this reality. But the trouble with the ego is that the ego has its own pursuits. And it's not just one ego when we talk of the ego, there's many eyes within the ego. So that's many different selves that are all competing to take the reins of the vessel and take it off in its own jolly little quest. But usually, this is detrimental to truth and detrimental to all of mankind thus far. And this is actually how we've ended up in such a troublesome situation, is because the ego um, is is fighting to be God, and it is through the pursuit of truth and the miracle of actually waking up to this reality that then one can start the process of unraveling all of the convoluted fantasies that the ego creates in order to get along with its game. And if we have a look at the day-to-day reality that we exist in and how we interact with people. So, for example, someone could come to you seeking advice. They could say, at my workplace, I had this really terrible interaction with a customer, and he was absolutely in the wrong over X, Y, and Z, for example. Now, most people, they're running in an automatic blueprint. And instead of really thinking about what they're hearing there and applying the right perception, they quickly fall into the same automatic response. And that is usually to, if one actually has conviction, say, they will do their best to try to appreciate the gripes and the concerns that are being presented. But unless one is in the right perception, then the responsibility will not be the correct response, because with the mind coming from an ego's perception, the ego wishes to attack. And that is what this individual with this gripe has perceived, that she has been attacked, and therefore the ego wishes to attack back. And that is due to the ego believing that it is invulnerable. Sorry, that it's vulnerable, that it can be attacked. And that is the vicious cycle that all of us, including myself, because this work is a consistent daily practice, in order to maintain this state of being requires tremendous hard work and tremendous honesty. So when one can perceive from the point of perception, the right mind, of spirit, then one can start to see that actually we are perfect beings created in the image of God. And when we use the word God, again, the creator, um, whoever made this reality, because I don't want to start going along the lines of any particular God. I'm personally of the opinion that all roads lead to one source. So we can say God, we can say source. But when we look around, we can see that in the loftier heights of this reality, there is no room for these type of energies, because love is the only true vibration, and it is fear which this ego perception wishes to operate in, and it's a fear of lack. And when one can start to realize the perfection and the dance of life and the wonder that is everything that is encapsulated in our existence, we can then start to glean a better understanding in order to perceive in the right mind and in order to respond in an appropriate manner. And that is where honesty comes in, and the importance of honesty and right perception.
And we spoke about this yesterday briefly, you and I as well, right? We mentioned, Jonathan and I were basically talking about how to maneuver this space and how to maneuver the spiritual communities, and we were sort of like, semi cynically, like, making fun of ourselves, I guess, where spiritual communities usually regress and tend to devolve into very ego driven. communities, right? And there is a very particular reason for that as to like why it happens. Um, because when you're playing around with a very primal emotion, which is fear, right? And you're playing around with a very sort of like primal sentiment, which is groupthink, right? Um, that tends to create um, sub layers of ego. And my problem with a lot of people who are in the spiritual fields, right? They're idealists, right? They're very heavy idealists. And this same idealism is most likely removed from, well, intelligence, and sort of like they don't have an informational database to sort of like judge the material and intellectual properties of an idea. So because this happens, you get all these culty you get these culty vibes from these people who are sort of like try to build some sort of like spiritual community, or some sort of esoteric whatever. This is why these secret societies tend to get created all the time, almost inadvertently, right? Because the people who are engaged in these practices, um, they're not honest about their own egos, right? Because their image and their self-image and their identity largely depends on well, portraying themselves as beyond the ego, right? This is what I've had a problem with for the longest time, because if you are beyond the ego and this world, this material realm that you and I inhabit, it, if this is a spawn of ego, right? It's a sort of like it's the result of ego-based thinking of separation and individual expression, right? Then if that were true, you would be beyond the ego, right? You would be beyond this world. So that's where we strike up a conversation about truth and honesty. I think it's very important, and largely, um, uh, probably the most important thing when it comes to spiritual work and shadow work. You have to admit to yourself, it's a very difficult thing. You have to confess to yourself that I too am ego driven in my own ways. Um, and when we talk about integrating the ego isn't a bad thing. Neither are emotions. But these sort of like spiritual gurus and so on and so forth, they always like to segregate these things into like a positive and a negative, and they have this like like higher than thou sort of like way of speaking down to people who are sort of like led by their emotions and so on and so forth. Emotions are very important. Emotions are very useful. They have a function in this realm. So when you get angry, for example, right, the anger is just telling you, most likely, that my boundaries are not being respected. So it's a messenger, right? Your anger is a messenger to your, and your ego, right, is what protects you in the material realm from having your boundaries broken, right? From damage and trauma being caused to you. Why? Because your ego, the selfishness of the ego, is the universe's way of giving you a self-defense mechanism against the world, because you live in a world of ego, and you live in a world of individual egos that are all expressing themselves individually, right? So a clash is bound to happen. So I don't like conveying emotions as inherently negative things, and I don't like conveying concepts as inherently negative things. Like Jonathan and I spoke about, let's say, let's talk about intimate subjects, or sexual intercourse, or sex, or so on and so forth. Most of these people will convey the divine act of intercourse as something inherently negative, right? And this is their own ego, right? And they want to project this ego through a collective filter, almost like a magnifying glass that they'll use. So they'll create this ideology, and they'll use the belief of others who are also subscribed to this ideology to magnify their ego, where their ego becomes detached from their persona, right? And the ego itself becomes an egregore. Notice how the word egregore starts with eg, with like ego, right? It becomes a separated, so their ego is so large that it literally separates from who they are and their being and their identity, right? And the ego itself becomes a sort of like pseudo sentient entity where other people with their beliefs and their subscription, their ideological and belief based subscription to this ego, feeds it, right? And now this person who's at sort of like the leadership, like at the reins, they'll say, well, I have no ego, I'm wholly detached from my ego, my ego is nowhere to be seen, when in truth his ego has grown so large that it has taken a life of its own. This is what a cult is, right? So how do we avoid this, right? And we need a neo type of thinking, right? A sort of like innovative type of thought, because
Mm.
without collective thinking, without collective actionable sort of like a hierarchy of actions or some sort of master plan, you can't move forward on only on an individual level. It's impossible.
I'd
So
like to
yeah,
say something on
yes,
that
sir,
there. So
please.
so you mentioned the word neo, right? Now the oneness, and um, the thing with the ego is that all of these different egos, all of these different selves, are all different compartments within the vessel, within the self. And the word holiness is something that should be meditated upon, because holiness means whole. There is no compartments. All of the compartments have been closed off so that the vessel is operating in a state of union. And the trouble that the ego has, of course, is it does its best to make meaning out of everything. And if we actually look at where we find ourselves in this reality, we're dealing with the five senses. All of it is an illusion. It's Maya. It's glamour. So the importance is to remind oneself that there is no bubble. There's no bubble that starts at the end of this vessel, this human body, this shell, this hardened shell, because the shell is hardened from all of this compounded trauma from years, from our parents, from generations. I mean, this is essentially millions of years in the making, and that's why to be here right now having such discussions, I'm so grateful for that, and I'm so grateful that there is an audience here that are pursuing this truth. But back to the topic. So, meaning. Now, when we look around the reality that we perceive with the five senses, our mind is firing off in real time all of the meaning that we can apply to the things that we see. So, because of the illusion of time within this reality, the ego wants to then apply all of its previous experience on a topic, on a meaning, to said perception. So, for example, say you were a young child and you had an accident on your bike, and you had somebody who crashed into you on another bike, and at that very moment, one of your parents went, "Oh no, this is absolutely terrible. This Asian woman on her bike crashed into you, and look what has happened." So, with the whole spinning elements of emotions and senses and everything that gets thrown into that, there's a possibility that this child, years later, when is asked if she wishes to go for a cycling trip over in Asia somewhere, there will be something lurking there that goes, oh, I don't know. There's fear. There's fear here. There's fear attached to this because of the meaning that's attached to the experience, to the perception, that then is carried forth with compounding momentum. So the importance of perception without applying meaning is essential. And that goes back to a great quote from a friend of mine who's a mentor and a teacher of mine. And he set me off on this journey of changing my perception. And he said, uh, the biggest error humanity has made is trying to make a meaningless world meaningful. So we take, for example, a bench, a park bench. So as one passes by the park bench, we see it. We see it with our physical eyes rather than the spirit, the God self, rather than looking through it and seeing there is no bubble, there is no difference. All of this is all intertwined in the same reality. The same elements make up everything that we experience. So instead of the uh, the spiritual sight of seeing the oneness in it all, the ego goes, bench. And then all of the flooding history comes in. The times that I would sit down, it's for sitting, it's resting. The time when I had, um, an unfortunate conversation with an ex-girlfriend at that bench at this place. And all of this meaning comes flooding in. And then it hijacks perception. And therefore, through all of this trauma and application of meaning and fear, it steals us away from the present moment. So I touched earlier on the fact that time only exists within this material realm. Now, out with time is non it cannot be quantified, and that is where the importance of living in the present moment is so essential. Because when one is truly present in the moment, it takes a shift away from any sort of horizontal perception. There's no previous application of memory, of perceived memory, of any history, of any of these situations and experiences we've had. And in the present moment, that shifts one's perception from a horizontal into a vertical perception. And it's in this present moment that we are always existing. And it is all that there ever is right now in the present. And that is where, many religious texts talk about the gift, because it is a gift, the present moment.
So there's beauty and wisdom to be found in these concepts, right? And when we talk about things like the present moment, and again, like I'm not someone who likes to speak with grandiose vocabulary about these things. The lesson and the function of all of this, the lesson behind all of this is very simple. Your ego sort of like maneuvers this world, like Jonathan mentioned, with the context of all that it has gone through. So your identity is basically like a collection of the memories and experiences that, well, you have had, and some of them affect how you view the world actively, and some of it affects how you view the world passively. And things like trauma and detachment, those things cause fragmentation. Fragmentation not only from the present moment, but fragmentation from your absolute total truth, right? So it's very easy to, well, listen to someone and sort of like, yeah, we hear the words all the time. They'll say, oh, like, life, is meaningless, and you make your own meaning. And then some other people will come out and say life is not meaningless, or the meaning of life is you're in this, like spiritual sort of like classroom where you have to go through these certain experiences to learn this and this and this. And what you have to understand, and I guess everyone has to understand, is just like the past and present, right? What lies between the past and present is the paradox of both, right? So the paradox of both meaning and meaninglessness, right? That is life. That is where you are. That is what you're currently going through. And the paradox of that is both of these sentiments are true. Both of these sentiments are applied, but we can't imagine how they're applied because, like I said, we live in a three-dimensional, well, classroom, right? Is basically a spiritual classroom. And what are you learning in this classroom, right? You're not learning detachment. You're not learning sort of like ego-driven practices. What you're doing is you're acquiring informational context for the soul and for the spirit, right? So when we talk about, let's say memories and stuff like that associated with things, we also have to understand that when you look at, like Jonathan mentioned, like a chair or something that reminds you of, some other thing. What are these things? These are just, holograms, right? They're sort of like symbolic geometry. They're symbolic images of things that relate to other things that are in your, well, subconscious or your memory, right? So when we talk about the present moment, it's not about, hey, forget all of these things and just be, right? Without any context, right? When we talk about the present moment, it's about understanding that the primary function of this world is to allow you to realize that if you gather up your past and if you gather up your future, right? All the potentials of the future, and sort of like collectively arrange them in your current mind to increase your state of consciousness, to augment it and to enhance it, you will find yourself in a place of higher vision and higher existence, right? If your energy, your attention, right, is in the past only or in the future only, and you're not present where you are now, your attention is elsewhere, you'll have a harder time gaining that intuitive knowledge or gaining that intuition to grasp the meaning, the deeper meanings of the things that happen in your life, right? So to go sort of like back to the topic, I guess, why honesty and truth is important. Truth and honesty with oneself is the filtration system through which you can know thyself. The moment you stop being forthcoming about objective truths and objective realities about yourself, about other people, about this world, so on and so forth, is the moment you send yourself on on a roller coaster of confusion. This is the state most people you find today who are slumbering because they have hypnotized themselves through dishonesty into a state of slumber. So this is why most people you talk to, what others rudely sort of like refer to them as NPCs, non-playable characters, the first feeling, the first intuitive emotion you get when you talk to these people is they're not really here. They're not all that present, are they? They're somewhere else. They're either in the past, right, living out their lives in sort of like fake past memories or fake past scenarios and narratives that are ego based, that have never happened, right? They're in grief, they're in sadness, they're in pain, they're in fear, or they're in the future. They're addicted, they're greedy, they're all about money, they're attaining this, attaining that, this, that. They're dreaming somewhere in the future. So when you're dreaming, you're away from the present self. And the present moment, your energy and your ability to manifest and your ability to learn and receive and change, make real change, because you can't make real change in the future. You can't make real change in the past. Where you can make change is the present, right? So this is why this explains to you, I guess, what kind of people are you going to be working with going forward? Because the more pain, the more trauma, the more fragmentation you have in the world, And we have a lot of that on our planet, God knows. And the more deception and confusion, people are going to retreat either in the past, or they're going to retreat in as a form of escapism, right? In entertainment, in future. And none of these things are bad, by the way. So inherently, the past isn't bad. Inherently, the future isn't bad. Inherently, even escapism isn't bad. But you have to understand that the problem is that these people are not using the past or using the future, using entertainment to augment and enhance their present selves. They're using them as a form to escape their present reality.
I'd like to just touch on something you said there. So
Please do, sir.
when when you talked there about the skills that we're acquiring throughout our life and the ability to be able to help others, to wake up others, to uplift them, and show them the light within themselves. And um, I think it's important in understanding oneself to talk about the three elements which make us up. So we have our essence, we have our ego, and we have our personality. So the essence, that is source. That is the parts of us which are true to our spiritual journey throughout this whole existence. Now, the soul is eternal. Um, and throughout all of this strife and struggle to get to this current point of a human incarnation, there's there's been untold suffering along the way, untold lessons, and that's where, if anyone's feeling down or feeling depressed about their existence, that is one of the most incredible things to first of all accept and acknowledge, and be grateful for. Is that you've made it this far. So essence, that is the parts which we can see in ourselves, inherent skills and talents, which we somehow have, certain skill sets which we look upon and we go, right, yeah, for some reason I'm very astute with this. And then we have the ego, or the various egos. And that um, is a multitude of all the different past lives. And it was at the stage of our passing out of the last incarnation and coming through to this next incarnation. And it was the last thought, the last collective um, sentiment. So if one passed from the last incarnation with the idea that life is a waste of time, then there's going to be one element, one I within the ego, which is going to be applying that same rhetoric to this incarnation. Just the same as, say, for example, in a previous incarnation, one was an alcoholic or a drug addict. There's going to be elements of that coming through within that ego, and that ego is going to want to go back on its self-destructive pathway. So the understanding that the ego is all of these other elements from past lives that are coming through, and this is what the alchemical work is. When we talk of transmutation, turning lead to gold, all of the ancient Hermetic teachings, that is what it's talking about. It's about refining the coarser elements within oneself into finer matter in order to strip away the eyes, the parts of our ego which do not serve us, and to support the parts of us which do serve us. Now, through that, um, we can then start to look at the archetypes that are operating within us, and we can start to bring in systems like the diamond of despair, which most people very often are operating in. But we'll touch on that at another point, because that's another kind of tangent. But the next element is personality. So personality is all the experiential, lived experience within this incarnation, which gives us the personality. So, for example, you grew up in a household where your parents were arguing all the time. That will likely carry through into your personality in some form where, say, if there's confrontation, the likelihood is you and your development in your personal journey will avoid confrontation because that's a trigger point for yourself because of the past situations you've been in. So the importance is of knowing thyself is to be able to identify all these different elements within ourselves and then start to see how these things are affecting the way that we respond in our daily life and how we can focus on the strengths we've been given with our essence, the
That's the
strengths that we have.
important part, everyone. Listen
Mm,
very carefully, because this is where most people stop doing. Okay, this is where most people, even though they're great in ideas and great in philosophy, what Jonathan is saying right now, you have to address these things with action, right? Go on,
exactly.
brother. I'm sorry. I just thought like it was very
So, yeah,
important, right? That moment where you switched from theory and now this is putting it into action. How do
yeah,
these things affect my life? Right? Please go on.
exactly. And this is where the real self observation begins. And it takes quite a moment because I mean, most people, they're operating in complete autopilot. They have no idea about any of these concepts. They have no idea about the psychology of man. They have no idea what they are, where they came from. They haven't thought about it. Now, that's absolutely fine. Okay, everyone's on their journey. But for the people that are on this journey, such as the individuals participating in this space, this is where one needs to realize that this is the only purpose that you have, is to work through this, to strive as a soul, to burn brightly, to keep your heart burning brightly, and to strive forth through the challenges and lessons that you have chosen to come back into this incarnation with in order to learn and ascend to a higher state of consciousness. So, all of these elements are going to be the basis of self work or self observation. And that's the beginning of starting to hash out uh, where you're coming from. And it's in these initial stages you can start to have these aha moments where you go, right, that makes absolute sense why I've been behaving in this way, why I reacted in this way. And
Yeah.
having the tools to be able to move forward is the first step. So
And it takes
it's very
balls, doesn't it, too, brother? Like it takes balls to admit those things to yourself. It's very
well,
difficult to.
it does
Yeah.
because the truth hurts. And it's very painful when one is removing these masks because we can look at the ego as all these various masks. We might have a mask that we have for our partner, we might have a mask we have in our working environment, when we are at the gym, when we're in the supermarket. All of these different scenarios have different masks. And that's the important part of going, hold on here. Am I actually being true to myself? Or do I have all these different facades because I'm trying to impress? I'm trying to hide something that I don't want others to see. But why? There's nothing to fear. And this goes back again to this whole idea that the ego loves its tricky little games and they all run on fear. And when one can stand in the face of truth, and it will be painful because the amount of times I have been brutally humbled along this way, and the embarrassment, the shame that I felt. But then through my shift in perception, I realized, no, this is just the ego and its tricky games. It wants me to feel like this, but that is not a real and true reality, and it's not a right perception, because we need to remember that we all make errors. Every single person makes errors, and the importance of forgiveness and compassion, that's where that comes in. Forgiveness for ourselves and also in turn forgiveness for others. And this is where the beginning of this evolution can take hold. And it's by not judging others, we also do not judge ourselves. And it's through accepting that, yes, we all make error, because if you look at from the moment you were born, that is when this game began. That's when the influence started showering down upon you. And yeah, you might not have been able to speak, but your senses were there. You could feel the vibrations around you. And very often, um, unless one is fortunate to have parents which are awakened, involved in esoteric practices, which, quite frankly, is very rare, um, we are immediately subjected to this bombardment from the moment we are being rocked in the manger, for example. And at that point, the purity and the innocence of a child is very important to think about. And that's why babies look um, at, uh, at certain people the way that they do, because babies are perceiving with purity. They can see aura, they can sense vibration subtly, and they have not got to a state where they are not feeling. And this brings us on to the next element, because feeling is very different to emotions, which have an intellectual and literal application. A feeling is the feeling of the energetic vibration. And that is, again, what Jack touched on, of the importance to be in the present and to be honest with oneself, because the society we live in, everyone is completely numbed out, whether it's from alcohol, whether it's from cannabis use, whether it's from pornography, whether it's from excess of junk food, sugary, refined nonsense. All manner of elements in this society are in place in order to dull us, to blunt the sharpness of our instrument, of our machine. So, in order to start getting back into feeling, one must then start to purify the vessel. And it's through feeling that we can then start to actually navigate and start to build our intuition to the point where we can say, okay, now the compass is actually working correctly. And it takes it takes a long time, because depending on what age everyone is there, um, it could be 20, 25, 30, 35 plus years of of numbness, of escapism, of trauma. And that is what makes it so challenging to wake up, and not just wake up, but actually actively then start doing the work. Because people talk about, oh, I'm awakened, right? But there's multiple levels of awakening. And of course, the pinnacle of that is enlightenment. So this is a journey of the soul, and this is why we are here. And the importance is to realize that there is no other purpose for us being here than to know thyself in the initial stages, and to then from there move forward in order that we can teach and respond appropriately, in order to nurture and support and forgive the world that we're in hopes that others can change their perception in order to create a more wholesome and loving world.
Now that's a healthy outlook, right? What I'll try to tell you guys what's not a healthy outlook. Um, the healthy outlook is this. Yes, there are several layers of awakening, but the final level of awakening, removed from all the bullshit, okay? Removed from all the bullshit. The final level of awakening that is possible in this realm is um when you wake up and it feels like pulling your head out of the sand, right? And the first thing you notice on the horizon, just imagine this grandiose image, okay? You've pulled your head out of the sand or out of an ocean, right? And you breathe the air for the first time, right, in your life. You have clarity, right? You have clarity, meaning, purpose. You look around you and you see everyone drowning. Like that scene for the Matrix, right? When Neo wakes up, he looks around and everyone else, there's hallways of people asleep, slumbering. And the very first emotion, the very first feeling you get that completely grips you at that moment, if you're not ready, is fear. This is why I'm against drugs, by the way, for the most part. But the next emotion that fills you up, if it's not fear, is an incredible loneliness. And then you realize that your awakening, for it to turn into enlightenment, then it must turn into a collective enlightenment or a collective awakening, right? Because you realize that you are part of the whole that we mentioned, holiness, right? Whole. And without the awakening of the whole, it's useless for you to pursue selfishly through the ego some sort of dream of self-liberation, right? It's useless. And it's important to understand why it's useless, right? Now, it's not useless to grow and educate yourself and spiritually sort of like enhance your experiences in this life, but you have to understand that every man that goes up uh, on the mountain eventually has to come down from the mountain, and he has to come down from the mountain with new perspective. What is the function of the mountain? Like, you climb it, you gain a new perspective on the world, and then you have to climb back down and share with the world the lessons that this mountain climbing has taught you, right? It's very important to be honest with oneself, and to it sounds cliche what we talked about. You've heard it 100,000 times, but it's true. If you wish to um sort of like upgrade and ascend in that spiritual classroom that we talk about, right, you have to understand that there's no other way of doing it other than completely basing your everyday living on truth, right? There was this TikTok thing that someone sent me, and it was a question. And the question is, if you could tell your 18-year-old self one thing, what would it be, right? And I'll tell you the correct answer, what I think the correct answer to that question is, and the correct answer is nothing, right? But now, if I were to sort of like get into the romanticization of me being able to tell something to my 18-year-old self, what I would tell them, obviously, is that the only and one thing the universe needs from you is for you to be your authentic self, right? Every fear that you will have to sort of like fight or resist or whatever comes from the fear of the inacceptance, your own inacceptance, not anyone else's, of your own authentic self, right? Now, if you can get out there in the world, right, and take all of these masks and be your authentic self, what's the first thing you will receive? You will understand that, hey, I'm blessed. Miracles are happening around me because I am doing as is predestined by the inherent design of this very world, right? What I am doing and how I am behaving. So it means if Jack of Faces says fuck sometimes, right, and that's authentic to me, that I'm going to come out and I'm going to say fuck sometimes, right? So I'm not going to come out and pretend I'm some sort of, oh, like some just spiritual, whatever master. This is how I choose to sort of convey my ideas and thoughts and whatever, because it's authentic to me. When someone does it and it's not authentic to them, you'll intuitively get like a bad feeling about it. Hey, this person is being a little bit fake. They're not being real right now, right? So it might sound cliche, it might sound simple, and if you ask anyone, everyone does it. Everyone's their authentic self. But in truth, no one is almost. Like 95% of people you will encounter and talk to are so far deep, they need such deep therapeutic healing and spiritual healing that they have even forgotten who they were before they even activated these layers of sort of like these ego mask layers, right? That they're going through life now. And why do we call them NPCs now, right? Because their true self is so lost either in the past or in the future that it doesn't even exist anymore in its current present form. So what I'm trying to educate on is I want to tell you that this is going to get worse before it gets better, right? At least this is my prediction. Okay, my prediction is this: the world is going to be a much more confusing place, right? And conscious creators will, you'll see less of them. You'll see less of them, and then things are going to happen that are going to confuse you. They're going to like try to, like scare you, and so on and so forth. This is all part of the lesson. If you're going to become someone who's sort of like advancing on their spiritual path, you have to understand that there are some very deep and hard truths that you'll have to face about your own self, right? And about the world and about other people as well. Um, because because this is going to be so heavy now, starting from now this year, I think, because it's going to be so it's not going to be as easy to escape from this, right? To escape from the mirror of life, in order to better yourself. um yeah, some people are gonna, sort of like rage against it. There will be more violence,
Mm.
there will be, more uh, incidents, let's call it that, right? Like more confusion, more like acts of terrorism, and shit like that. Idea is this: if you remain steadfast in your pursuit of the absolute truth, and if you can fearlessly go towards your own truth, none of these things will touch you. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's never been more important um, a time to do this work, and this is why there is, of course, such an awakening, the age of Aquarius. Um, and regarding the NPC label, when I would often hear that, there was times when I would get frustrated because I would think, well, yeah, why can't everybody see what's going on? And you mentioned that earlier, and that's the point of the awakening, when that absolute loneliness first of all comes in, and um, through working with that, I'm now able to perceive that with compassion and forgiveness, and it goes back to remembering that behind the hard outer shell that most people are operating from, their autonomous, traumatized, fearful shell, there is a soft, loving inner core in all of us. And whether it's just a spark or it's a burning flame, we must remember that within every being, every brother, sister, son of God, there is that spark. And the importance to perceive that in them is the act of forgiveness. And through that, it's a blessing upon ourselves and to them, because someone may have strayed so far from source, not by any action or fault of their own. Well, not by any action, I mean present actual conscious action, because that's the whole point when we're talking about waking up. It's actually coming to the realization that up until X point, the machine was running on autopilot. So the important part is to remember that while it's frustrating, we're moving into the stage where these individuals are going to very much need an understanding of where they are,
Yeah.
and how to navigate and move forward, because most of us, I imagine, will have been in a gradual awakening over our lifetimes, or maybe it's been in the past 5 years, because the COVID situation shed a massive light on so many things that were just, you know, crystal clear, really, that okay, something doesn't add up here. But regardless of how long an
Oh man.
individual's been on this path of awakening of truth, there's going to be a multitude of other people out there. When the penny drops, it is going to
Yeah.
be. Um,
They're going to be
very,
violent woken up by a very
yeah,
loud noise, right? And
yeah,
what happens when we're violently woken up? We lash out, right? It's not
mm,
like you've got like it. Just pretend it like this as an example, right? We and well, you and most people who have sort of like hopped onto this train in the past few years, they've sort of been like Jonathan said, they gradually been able to like slowly wake up. Oh, okay, it's the morning and the sun's coming up, and but those who have not done the work, right now, they're going to wake up to firework. They will be forced to do so. This is why these things are happening in the world, not because like of any other reason, not because of maliciousness or anything like that. The function of this realm, of this three-dimensional realm that we are in, is to awaken you, and is to allow you to awaken, well, painlessly, if you have the wisdom and the know-how and the ability, the willpower to work on yourself, well, like some people have shown. But most souls have not shown that. Most people have not shown it. So they're in a state of slumber where they're fast approaching a time and an age. This is rhythmic, this is cyclical, it's a prophecy, it's a cyclical prophecy. They're approaching this moment where it's almost like a prerequisite now to be awakened to a certain degree. So a lot of these people lashing out, it's almost like not they're not um what's the word for it, like they're not for this world anymore, right? They're
yeah.
not
Can I just
compatible
touch on that?
anymore with what this world
Um,
is supposed to be. Go on, please, Jonathan.
so, if it's not one's karma, one will not suffer, and one will not devolve in their state of consciousness. And while we must strive and do our utmost best to support our brothers and sisters during this time, there is going to be, of course, incredible challenges as the reality sets in, of what's happening. Now, we are in the Kali Yuga stage of these cyclical movements, and it's the age of disagreement. And that's why we see everywhere division on the level that we see it. And, never before in recent history has there been so many different things for everybody to disagree on. There was a time when, say, religion, what football team in recent history, and politics, they were the main issues of contention. Whereas now we've got all manner of different elements to divide and conquer this modern civilization, and that is unfortunately what the aim is of the Dark Ones. And we can see it everywhere. And we were discussing this the other day, um, Jack and I. But I just realised we've passed an hour, and I was thinking, um, if there's anybody that's listening that wants to ask a question or wants to say something, then I think maybe this is a good time.
Yeah, raise those hands, ladies and gentlemen. Raise those hands. If not, that's okay too.
So no pressure.
But I love this open conversation type of thing, man, because like it sometimes when you speak in sort of like allegory and so on and so forth, a lot of people miss this, I've noticed, right? And I try not to impart too much, right? I don't like to program people about like what to think and what to say and stuff like that, but at the same time, this information has to be delivered in a manner that's like understandable for people who are just like sort of like getting into it. And again, we don't you don't want to aggrandize it or like dramatize it so it feels like, oh, it's like this bigger than it is. But this is big. It is big, it's sort of like um work that was done quietly behind the scenes. And what differentiates all of us, I guess, as individuals from one another, is not like, oh, I'm better than you because I've put in more work and I've received more than this. No, 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 no. What differentiates us is our willingness to do so. It's a choice, right? So someone chose to, not do a certain thing. Another person chose to go and pursue sort of like spiritual living, right? I don't like talking about these things. It's not a competition, right? In a lot of these sort of like spiritual, whatever, like teacher types or whatever, they inadvertently like to present it as such. Like they like to present it as, oh, it's a competition. It's not a competition. We're all trying to sort of like make the world better. My argument, for example, with this is that you can't make the world better through ignorance, right? You have to be honest. Sometimes you have to be rude. Sometimes you have to be brutal. Sometimes you have to be raw. Sometimes you have to be honest. Sometimes you have to lie a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
Um, that's how it is. Like all of this happens in a classroom, right? A good teacher sometimes will lie to their students, right? That's how it is. And there's a natural hierarchy that well is naturally created, and then there's a hierarchy that's unnaturally created. For example, Jonathan mentioned what, quote unquote, the dark ones, right? Who are these people, right? They are people who have no context of gradual spiritual self improvement, yet they have been given a database of knowledge that they did not earn. So they don't have the spiritual sophistication of someone who would be awakened, so on and so forth, but they hold all the knowledge, the intuitive knowledge that would come with spiritual sophistication. So
Mm.
what happens to these people? They get trapped in this ego state where they are trying to sort of
Which is
maneuver the
satanic
world. Yeah, which is
in its
satanic.
essence.
Yes, this is the left hand path, right? What is the left hand path? I have access to knowledge that I otherwise would not have access to, right? If someone did not hand it to me, right? Well, what are these
And
people trying?
also choosing
Yes,
um, the ego
yes,
as the highest
yes.
pursuit. The desires of the ego trump the will of God.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you
And
can
that's the
make a
trouble,
god
yes.
out of ego. You can make a god out of ego in the sense of like, my ego is the highest and most valued and precious thing. But that is a very, very long road to
And
loneliness.
that's what people need to realize, when we've been talking about all of these subjects today, is that within all of us, there is good and evil. The line runs straight through us. That would be, dishonest to say that, oh yeah, I'm perfect. I'm completely, no bad thoughts come through my mind. That is what human nature is. That is the struggle and the strife that we are having to work through, is to choose the good, is to choose to be a person who isn't easily tempted. Now, if we look at the influences that um, are prevalent in society right now, it is a satanic influence, and it's a challenge for some people to actually connect the dots, of course, because certain people have different faculties and the ability to correlate the information to see these patterns. Now, if we look at the destruction of the family unit, for an example, in the West specifically, that is of massive benefit for the powers that be and the powers that shouldn't be, because they can see that through destroying the family unit, which is a powerful collective, which is a tribe, they are then going to be creating all of these individuals, but not in the real sense of what an individual is. And this is what we're trying to cultivate here, is that the ability for someone to truly become an individual, not just a carbon emulatory copy of what they see in their day to day life. Now, with all of this prolific pornography, the promotion of this OnlyFans, and we're seeing the corruption of the youth, and have been now for um, a number of decades, and if not longer than that. I mean, this is a plan that has been underway for a very long time, and the importance of operating in a divine way is how one can start to completely bring that auric essence within one's day-to-day present state. So Of course, we all have temptations. We're only human. And that is where various religious texts hold many keys which are obfuscated, and it's allegorical because it's not meant to be read literally. And it took me many years to get to this stage to see all of the elements of the puzzle which bring together the realization of actually the state of reality that we're existing in. Now, when you have individuals who are corrupted with pornography, they are stuck in a lower state of consciousness. They're vibrating at a very low state because that is a state of desiring sex, which is a very primal and carnal desire. And that is also linked in with survival. And that is one of the lowest states of consciousness. And that is what the ego is constantly chirping away, going, if we don't do this, you're not going to make it, you're not going to survive. And again, where does that come from? It's a fear vibration. And the important part is to get into daily practice of a way of being which is pure. Now, the trouble that with this whole religious angle, and the way that they've inverted it and they've made it look like some fantasy cult for many people, because there's so many people out there, they have no belief in God, um, they have no virtues other than I will do as I please. There are no consequences. And look where they are now. We have men who believe that the things that they're watching online is how to treat a woman. We have the women who cannot find a genuine man because of all of this situation. Therefore, they're turning to women. And that is, again, an inversion of the soul essence, because within all of us, we have a balance of divine masculine and divine feminine. And the important part is to nurture both of those elements in tandem as we grow. But because of this inversion, which is, of course, part of this whole transhumanist focal point, we we're finding it that people are fragmented and they are unable to find peace. And while on the outside they might be getting satisfaction from their cheap thrills, from their their sexual encounters, their drug use, their nightclubs, their online entertainment, when you really sit with them and have a conversation, most of these people are deeply unhappy and they're deeply depressed.
Yeah.
And
Jonathan,
it's,
don't you agree that it is the amount of work it takes for one to even get to a point where these people can confess, not to you, but to themselves, that they are deeply
yeah,
unhappy. The amount of that's years of work sometimes. Sorry to interrupt, but it's just worth
yeah, I
mentioning,
mean,
right?
exactly. And but it's important also to say that it all comes down to the willingness to actually look and go, okay, am I being honest with myself? To look in the mirror and go, right, yes, I have been guilty of X, Y, and Z before. I was in error, but now I know, and I have a guide of truth within me, a compass which is now operating, going, well, actually, the way that I believed before to be okay, an okay way to carry myself, that is not acceptable. Whereas many people, they will get the call, but they will not answer because the work and the pain involved, the splitting of friends, of old habits. This is the type of work where one can look around quite quickly and realize, hold on here, none of this is real. None of these people that I socialize with are real. None of these situations. I mean, and that is for the majority of people out there. But the important part is to remember that all it takes is a small step, one step at a time. And I don't know what the classic quote is, but it's again the idea of when looking to the mountain summit, knowing the trip will be arduous. Step by step in the present moment will get you there.
Hell yes. Look, and we're not saying like, the other radical side of that is people tend to antagonize things. We touched on this yesterday too. Like people tend to antagonize things like, well, all sex is bad and somehow sex is naughty. But what we're talking about inversion of these concepts, right? Sexual intercourse is a very divine thing. But let's not also sit in the room and say that it is like this. Again, dramatization is the devil's work, right? You need gentleness, softness when you touch these subjects, because these are subjects that are very intimate to a lot of people, right? So the inversion happens also with how we talk about subjects, how we talk about emotional subjects, how we talk about subjects when it touches other people, their pain, their wounds, their scars, right? People have a lot of pain associated with these aspects of living, right? So the inversion there happens not only in a direct manner, but in the sense of like, um, if I guilt trip you, and if I shame you, right, for something that you did, and I tell you this is a shameful thing to do, right? What am I actually doing to you, right? Why am I doing this? I should not be doing this. Firstly, who am I to judge you? Secondly, the more gently and softly I can explain these concepts to you and why they're important, the better results I'm going to have, right? So, inherently, right, sexual intercourse is a great, wonderful, beautiful thing, right? Um, Now, when you corrupt that, right, and when you turn it into something that it's not, right, when you turn it into a rebellious act, when you turn it into this and that, you're free to do so. The creator of this world loves you in the sense of um like he'll allow you, the creation itself will allow you to fully express your choices.
Exactly.
Yeah, that
That's an
yeah,
important point.
yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are like engaging in this sort of like perversion of natural design. It doesn't grant you anything fulfilling, right? And now I know this, and maybe Jonathan knows it, maybe you guys know this, but the people who don't know this, what's wrong is for us to go to those people and tell them, "Oh, you pieces of shit! Look what you're doing. You should be ashamed of yourself. You guilt, 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 guilt." What are you doing? You're just throwing more ammunition at someone who is already wounded, right? So it's very important to understand. Even like people when they talk to me and when they come to me and so on and so forth. Like when it comes to matters of sexuality, I had a few sessions yesterday where young men and young women are literally unable to talk about these topics, and I'm telling them like, why are you like, look, you're ashamed, let's say, of like, I don't know, 3 days ago you hooked up with someone you didn't want to hook up with or something like that, and now you're ashamed of talking about it. But where is the shame coming from? Are you ashamed of yourself? Are you ashamed of talking with me because you think I'm going to judge you? You think I'm going to judge? Sexual expression is a part of natural life, and sexual desires are also a part of natural life. There's nothing inherently wrong about any of these things. So when you have like these religious, dogmatic, whatever, or people who come out and like saying like, oh, like women should be stoned if they sleep with a lot of men, this is inherently
Yeah.
counterproductive.
And this is the trouble with the corruption of these teachings, these ancient teachings, because if you look at Catholicism, going in to confess one's sins to the priest, um, and having to sacrifice and seeking redemption, God God is not sitting there judging. God loves you. Source loves you. The vibration of that is so perfect. It is not. It's there's no concern about that. But the trouble is that these teachings have confused what the real true way of being is. Now, if we look at the union of man and woman, a divine union, what we can see there is the wonder of life, which is procreation, and the importance of respecting the act of sexual energy exchange. And that is something that where people need to realize. And this is the double trick they're playing by convincing everybody that it's some sort of shameful act, that it shouldn't be going on. Of course, then it makes it something which is forbidden. It's the classic again, back to this
Yeah,
whole
makes it
forbidden.
sexy, right? to
Uh-huh.
to give away your energy for free. It makes it sexy in the sense, oh, it's forbidden. No, 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 forbidden
Yeah,
woods.
and then over the years, the lack of education regarding these things, the fickle nature of society has meant that this has all been pushed behind closed doors to the point where people have had to find out their own way and experiment, and that creates all manner of deviancy. And again, the trouble with that is that through the compounding nature of all this time, of all these spaces within a different, time of society, whether it was the late 1800s, the early 1900s, the mid 1900s, or the present day where we are now. Um, they've all come with their challenges, but the main issue that we're seeing now is that okay, we've never been more liberal, we've never been more open, we have never been more accepting. But actually, what are we accepting? We're accepting um, an element which has not been divinely respected, because yes, of course, everyone has the right to do as they please and there is no judgment, but the question is, would that individual have set about those actions had they not had a certain influence, a certain whisper in the ear from a friend, a certain movie that they watched? I mean, the levels of programming that are out there in the world are so subtle. And this is probably actually this could be a completely different talk when we bring in the elements of divine art, the musical tones, and how these Hollywood movies are all perfectly curated so that there's multiple levels working upon the psyche, and so subtle that that again it's not noticed. Now, the trouble with this modern world is the lack of respect for what it actually is to be engaged with someone in a divine union. Because what is love? And that again is another subject which I think it's important to touch upon. And to the Western mind, the Western world, love is two arrows through a heart. The whole idea of Cupid's arrow, and the idea that I only love you because X, Y, and Z. I only love you because you do this. And if you look at most people, they're actually only in a relationship because it's a codependent, what can I give you and what do I get out of you, and vice versa, rather than
Transaction.
transaction, rather than it being a state of actual true love, which is divine love, which is unconditional. It's not possession. And that
Don't
is,
you find it funny than the men's movement? How the men's movement right now seems to be the whole sort of like pretext is all women are a certain way and all women are transactional and women cannot experience unconditional love. I find that so funny as well. It's like
I don't know if
um
I've come across that.
yeah, it's a very, very big, like increasingly growing sentiment. And like I get asked sometimes, like, hey, I love this person, but they don't love me back. Like, what do I do? How do I, get them that stuff? And I immediately tell them, you don't love this person. And they're like, how do we? Like, I don't love this person. I'm crazy about them. You're crazy about them, maybe, but you don't love them because you don't understand what love is. Love is like one-sided love doesn't exist, right? Love is the inherent understanding, right, that both you and them belong to the same collective spirit or spiritual force,
Absolutely,
right? So
absolutely.
if how can your love be one-sided? Love can only be uh, equally shared. One-sided love does not exist. So whatever you think is love is some sort of maybe like lust, maybe interest, maybe curiosity, but it's not love. Love can only
That
occur
that's it.
when both parties
Word there.
inherently, right, when you see a person and they see you, and immediately the kindred soul connection occurs. That is love, right? Or love can be gained over time, this unconditional state of I love you, therefore I put the same value, right, on your life and your experiences as I do mine, because I see myself in you, myself in my wholeness in you, and you see yourself in your wholeness in me. So one-sided love, this is what I call manufactured suffering. It's Hollywood suffering, right? Because how Hollywood depicts the idea of romance and romantic relationships. And another crazy statistic you might you might want to know is 80% of the youth in the West, the f- they simulate their first sex this is actual research, by the way, they simulate their first sexual encounter according to Hollywood movies and TV shows on Netflix. This is crazy when you think about it, right? um, and this is a statistic. So when you teach these kids, like, oh, your heart is going to be broken, then you're going to be sad in your room, then you're going to go out and meet a new person, then they're going to break your heart, and then your old boyfriend is going to come back into your life. These are all archetypal
And they're playing
narratives.
out constantly.
Yeah,
That is what most people
constant.
are whirring in and out of the same cycles, the same trauma, compounding,
Yep.
compounding, compounding until they're at a state where they're so fragmented and they do not know where to turn and where to go, sadly.
But true love can be, it can be so simple, it can be so simply experienced if you allow yourself to detach from these narratives of suffering that you're programmed to believe that this is how it always happens. Well, that's how it was in the movies, so I guess that's how it has to be when you have a disagreement with your partner, right? No relationship is perfect, even ones with unconditional love. When you have a disagreement with your partner, right? And every movie out there teaches you you're going to get your heart broken. You're going to go out, walk in the rain, and listen to sad songs and be depressed. You can choose to transmute that into further love for them because they've earned it, they deserve it, in a sense, right? But the movie doesn't show you that. The movie shows you the absolute radical opposed, like, point of opposition to that, which is the worst case scenario is going to happen all the time. You're going to have a rebound relationship with someone, then you're going to have like this dramatic heartbroken moment with your past ex who is actually the love of your life, maybe, right? And you're going to have this thing with them. It's like they'll say like, I loved you so much, but I can't bear the fact knowing that you've been with another man, and I can't. It's all about I
And that's
can't, I
ego, right?
can't, I can't.
That's where the
Yes,
ego comes in and it just wrecks the whole thing. It comes in with a wrecking ball and just destroys it all. Rather
you
than
get
coming from
trapped.
heart, it's a head trip. It's not a heart trip.
Yeah, yeah. So this is why it's important to deprogram from even the concept, even the religious like structures and these large scale like spiritual like influencers and stuff like that. When they say ridiculous things like, if you've had sexual intercourse with three or more men, you're scarred for life and you're wounded and you're like, what are you doing, man? Yes, we can all agree that intercourse is a divine exchange of energy, right? Is your life over? Are you unforgivably scarred and wounded for the rest of your life because you made a choice or you made a mistake? If someone taught this to my daughter, right? um I would hate this, right? I would not hate the person who taught it because they're blind and confused, but I would just hate the sentiment. You understand? Like, um, I want people to understand that nothing in this world is unforgivable. Nothing in this world is unforgivable. The whole idea and primary lesson of this world is to be able to forgive ourselves and others. This doesn't mean because we are able to forgive, we go out and we do, wrongful things or immoral things or, perverse things or whatever. But even the some of the things that are presented to you as perverse, they're not inherently perverse. It's just we make them perverse, right? We make them perverse by corrupting them and presenting them as things that they are not, right? For example, if you had a child and you raised that child in a cave somewhere, and if you taught them like water is fire and fire is water, right? They're going to go living their whole life that that is true until they see actual fire and get burnt by it, right? So when the what spawns the pain, right? It's an extreme example. What spawns disappointment and pain in life is the objective reality which exists, and then the programming which you have and the incompatibility of this programming in relation to what is true, right? So when someone tells you, well, sex is a terrible thing, right, and you encounter it, you have this preconceived notion that you're somehow engaging in this filth and mud and muck and just terrible practice, when in truth it's none of these things. You have made it this thing. When you have an argument with another person and you feel almost like obligated to lash out and throw things at the wall because that's what they do in on the TV, right? You almost feel an obligation to simulate it and do it because that's the only programming you have. Part of becoming a conscious creator and part of becoming someone who is on the pursuit of truth is understanding that you can choose otherwise. And there are ways that you have not yet grasped or seen that you can pursue into a softer, more gentler living.
And that comes back again to this application of meaning. And that is where I will remind everyone that the biggest error one can make is trying to make a meaningless world meaningful. And that is the whole concept of this application of meaning, and how the ego wishes to apply its fantasies and its illusions to that which is not real. And the importance of correcting the perception to right perception, to correct being rather than insane operation.
um Look, I get a lot of you're gonna get a lot of flack, I'm sorry, for this as well. My principle in life is this: I'm gonna come out and I'm going to interpret the objective truth and I'm going to relay it to the best of my abilities, right? Whatever that nets me, right? So whatever following or whatever benefits, whatever good that nets me, great. Whatever bad that nets me, no problem as well. Like, for example, some of the stuff that I post about intergender, right, like relationship and dynamics and stuff like this, a lot of people they inherently are so aggressive towards the idea. When I say things like, you know what, as a young woman, I think young women should be taught to reward virtuous good men with sex, right? And there are men coming out there and they'll tell me, bro, like, stop this incel talk. And my reaction to that is it's so amusing, right? That saying something as simple as that, where a knightly virtuous man should be rewarded with the greatest creative and source of health, right, instead of the men who are going like face first into darkness, that is somehow now an incel talking about it. And I'm totally fine with taking flack for that, because I understand that regardless of how opinionated someone might be, when there is an objective truth, right, and that truth can eventually will unfold, and these people will eventually understand, I don't fear making that truth known, right? And when we talk about trying to give meaning to meaningless things, like, if you ask me, right, I'll tell you, right, is life meaningless? Life is not meaningless at all. Life has an objective meaning in the sense of, like, you're going through this life to better yourself, to improve yourself, right? You're going to, there's more depth, there's much more depth to this, but we're not going to talk about this today. But just understand that the actions that some of these people in power and influence that are taking today is they're trying to get you to care about things that largely don't even matter that much. They're not even that important in the grand scheme of things, in the scheme of you growing and spiritually increasing yourself. It doesn't matter much. Oh, look, someone's requesting something. Let me see. Dim Sum, what's up, brother? I'm gonna give you, how do I give this guy speaker invitation? Yeah, there
That
you
should be it there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, brother, you're online.
Hello.
How you doing?
Just wanted to first say thanks for hosting the space, but I just wanted to touch back on like the pursuit of truth and how going back to when you said um, the child who was taught that fire was water and water was fire, and when they touch fire, they're burnt by it and in a sense hurt and like they suffer from it, right? And what I thought from that, well, a sentence popped up in my head. It was that suffering is, in a sense, misalignment to the truth.
Yes.
So when you're misaligned, you like therefore become hurt by when you experience the truth. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you think about that.
This is exactly what I meant, and you understood it perfectly, my friend. And largely, what Jonathan even described today as to like what is happening and why things are happening, you have to understand that this result of our mass collective coming forcefully, by the way, into alignment with the truth, because they are so objectively departed from the truth. The true lessons, the lesson of this world is its truth, is the objective truth. It is not some state of superposition, right, that can be affected infinitely and just turned into anything you want. No, there are objective lessons to this life, right? And the more misaligned our collective becomes with these objective truths, what we refer to as mother nature, quote unquote, natural, right? The larger the pain and the feedback will be, because the pain is not inherently evil, but it's just a feedback mechanism. It's the result of your ignorance, right? Because if I believe that if I drink fire, my thirst will be satiated, right? That's not going to happen, because the fire is not a part of my creation. I did not create fire. I can only impress my thoughts upon it. Fire objectively exists as a collective materialized thought form, right? That our collective has created, right? So when I see the fire and I try to consume the fire and I'm going to be burnt, I'm going to be in pain, but it's going to teach me a lesson, right? So it's a journey of understanding and studying without the interference of ego-based thought patterns. What is the objective function slash truth of this world? What is it trying to teach me? And what is the philosopher's stone? What is the primary playbook through which the universe teaches you about yourself? It's your own goddamn self, right? That's why we say know
So
thyself,
I'd
right?
like to touch on this point of suffering. So the importance is to realize that suffering is what shapes us. Now, the ability to suffer with intention, and that is to put oneself through suffering with the aim to grow, to develop. It's not involuntary suffering that, oh, I have no idea why this is happening. This is terrible. There's no escape. It's all doom and gloom, rather than actually having the tools. And that's what we're trying to work through here in this pursuit of truth, is to have the tools to be able to say, okay, now I can see why I felt this suffering. I can see now, if I work on this specific aspect and understand myself, I can then see the mechanics behind the machine, because we're all just very complex machines. And in knowing the mechanics, one can then identify the situation and the trigger for said feeling or emotion, really. Now, the thing is with emotion and feeling, because I talked about this earlier, is that many people's emotions, they're all trigger points, and it's all literal. It's the preconceived notions of I'm experiencing this, and there we go. All of the past comes flooding in and goes, yep, and you're meant to feel this way, rather than the feeling. Now, what people don't realize is that you will go through the motions of each day with different feeling. Not every day are you going to spring out of bed and go, I feel great, and you've got a buoyant spring in your step. There's going to be days when you're saying, right, well, I'm actually feeling quite low. But the importance is to then assess, okay, well, where's this coming from? Now, such simple things as the weather affect us. If it's a beautiful sunny day, then of course most people are in a good mood. But if it's doom and gloom outside, it's raining, then that will affect how we're feeling. Now, but actually, when we assess that and we get to the root of that, and we go, well, hold on here, why is this happening? Why are my perceptions, which are all illusions, causing me to feel this way? And then when one can start to identify that and not identify with said trigger points, that is when one can start to know oneself. And that's what the work is all about, in order to see the trigger points of the machine and its inner workings.
It's funny how we call it bad weather, right? Where I come from, that's how people call it. Like, oh, it's good weather, meaning it's sunny, and bad weather, meaning it's raining. And I'm like, what's wrong with rain? But it's because the rain, or like Jonathan said, right? It triggers something in people that they find negative, right? So even that is coming from within. It's not like the rain is inherently bad. Some people dance for rain, some people pray for rains. Some people, like myself, they become inspired when it's raining. I become inspired to write, to think, so on and so forth, right? So it's, you have to understand that most of the things that externally as bad probably are not, right? And they try to just serve as mirror points or points of reflection for you to sit down and be like, wait, why is this making me feel this way? What kind of emotion or mental state is this triggering in my psyche? Why is this occurring? And when you start to observe yourself and question the world in that sense, you sort of become closer and closer to its objective truth, right? This is the probably the most controversial thing I could say to someone who has a very, very like distinctive like spiritual ego, right? Because they they have a tendency to sort of like they have you noticed that like these spiritual masters they never like to talk about themselves. And for some people, like for some reason, people register that as a sign of humbleness. I see that as a sign of bullshit, for example, right? Um, it's almost like, let me talk about everyone else and everyone else's ego, and but let me never touch my own ego, right? That type of thing, right? It's very important to understand that you are affected by the world, and you are exposed, and you are vulnerable to suggestion. Most people, and I worked 11 years in behavioral therapy. I know exactly how much people are open to suggestion, and especially the people who say and think that they are not open to suggestion are the most open to suggestion, because um they cannot even comprehend or want to like they cannot even comprehend the scenario where they would be affected by the external, where their whole identity is basically based on external stimuli, right? um it's important to understand that you have your weaknesses, you have your shortcomings, you have your sins, you have moments where you feel weak, you have moments where you feel, disencouraged, you have moments where you feel uninspired. These are all natural occurrences. The moment you start to reject these things and deny these things about yourself is the moment you start to reject sort of like the lesser God that resides within you, right? Um,
And
honestly,
that's where
bro.
the false gods comes in.
Yes, sir.
This idea of false gods, because if we're praying to these gods of sickness and all of these illusions and realizing that actually, no, the Creator is absolutely perfect, and there can be no anger, there can be no fear, because it is only love. And again, the trouble that comes with that is people say, well, how can there be only love when there's so much suffering in the world? And that is where this concept of the separation comes in. And it's the separation from the collective soul consciousness before we're birthed into these physical bodies. And as soon as we're then birthed, then the ego comes hold and it goes, right, I'm God. And therefore, it starts creating all of its false idols, all of its own little gods, which then run amok and then start creating all of the troubles which then start to affect us. And going back to this point of understanding oneself, where our awareness is concentrated, where our focus is concentrated on, that is what we're going to experience in the world. So the trouble is, of course, with so much negativity and the technological age bombarding us with information, it's very difficult to shut off from that and not be affected. And if one is to go about a little experiment where shut off from the social media, shut off from the news, and have a specific mantra that you're repeating every hour or every midday or something, and practice this positive state of being, and then observe how the world around you starts to reflect that back to you, because it's a mirror world that we live in. And that's what makes it a challenge, because never has it been more difficult to maintain one's own center of being and focus when there's a million and one things that are trying to grab our attention and say, no, focus on this, do this. And yeah, it's mainly all fear based. And that's how the individuals that are controlling the narrative right now want it to be, because people that are in a state of fear are easily controlled.
People get confused by this too, brother, right? People get, when we say, look, like someone might, join the call now, and they would be right in a sense to call us hypocrites, because they would tell you, hey, you just told me that there's an objective reality and truth that I have to study, but now you guys are telling me that the world responds to my subjective, sort of like mental state. And again, this is the law of paradox. You have to understand that there is an objective consensus reality that you have to pay homage to. This is Mother Nature, right? And then there is a subjective, not reality, okay, but a sort of quantum, the ability to quantum shift, to attract those things that are already existing in this reality around you, and then to create, to bring forth and to manifest new
Exactly.
things.
I'm glad that you brought that point up, because that is where the confusion can arise. Because of course we need to operate in the physical world. When I say, you know, there is no meaning to anything, I don't mean that give up your job and just go and sit on a hill and do nothing. That's not what I'm
In a
saying.
cave.
I'm saying that it's by first of all recognizing that all of this ego application to perception is what results in wrong thinking. And it is, in the hidden realms around us, which we cannot see with the five senses, which is all operating in a vibration. This is where the subtle tones of reality are operating, and they're doing their own hidden workings. But these are the deeper levels of the work. But in the first instance is realizing that the suffering that one is going through is as a result of the wrong perception, and a shift into a perception which is based on the divine perfection of the creator. And in bringing that into one state of being, that shifts away from the ego's perception, which is fear-based, into a love-based perception of forgiveness
And they invert that
And
too, don't they? Like,
exactly.
when you notice, when you start to notice like how they invert. So now they're teaching, let's say you're born a woman, and they're teaching, well, if you think yourself as a man, you can be a man. But they're teaching you, they're inverting the idea of true manifestation and sort of like subjective attraction, the law of attraction, by telling you that actually everything is an illusion, everything is a hologram, and it's a measure. All you have to do is believe that you're a man, you're a man. That's not how it works, my friend. The collective reality, right, does not succumb to your desires, because that's what it is. That's a desire, right? Um, what it does, it out of love for you and your desires, right? This is the key difference. Out of love for you and your desires, it will conspire to facilitate that which you desire, but only if it serves your growth. And the only time this will occur in your life, the only time this will happen, is if you are, guess what? Going back to that point, living in authenticity, because living in your authenticity is good for your growth. So when you're living in your authenticity, you automatically start to have desires that are that are authentic to you, that are good for your growth, and that is when manifestation occurs. If for some reason I'm removed from my authentic self, which is most of these people who are stuck in this dormant state of partial sleep, right? What they manifest is, well, I want to pretend I'm 168 centimeters in height, right? That's like, I think, 5'5" or 5'6" inches or whatever, feet or whatever it's called. I can't believe myself into a professional basketball player. Okay, it's not going to happen. It's impossible. It's just not going to occur, whether I want it or not. But in my authentic self, I don't want that to happen either way, because it goes against my imprint. Then why was I born this way? Why was I given this imprint to then what? Push the imprint to its opposite direction, to its utmost opposite expression in the material realm? That makes no sense, right? So, firstly, even things like physiognomy, for example, you study the imprint to sort of reverse engineer your purpose and your goal, and then it becomes also, you know um, relatively functionless once you understand what your purpose and your goal is, right? But it's a good tool for people who are so far removed from their intuitive senses and so far removed from their spiritual authentic truth, to reverse engineer this is what therapy does, or good therapy does, let's say effective therapy does, not the therapy you'd see today, but this is what therapy does, including behavioral therapy and other things like this, regressive hypnosis, so on and so forth. This is the function of all of these practices, right? To sort of like reverse engineer, studying your imprint, your archetypal base, your mental mapping, how you view the world, so on and so forth, to get to the bottom of who were you before all of this programming happened, right? Okay, that's the last thing I'm going to say today. There was a great talk. I'll let Jonathan sort of like, you know, pull us out of it with whatever you want to say, brother. But thank you for sharing this space with me. Super cool to chat. I know this was like not pre-planned, and this wasn't like as scripted or whatever as we would like, but hopefully we do more of these and have these conversations where sort of like people can step in and ask questions and stuff like that too. I want us to create some sort of community as well, where we will share things that we find beautiful, art, so, music, songs, movies, whatever. This is a wonderful thing. This is a wonderful thing, for sure.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great time to wrap up. Yeah, I really enjoyed the discussion that we had today, and it flowed just as I expected it to flow. And the main aim of this is the pursuit of truth. And I hope that everyone that has been listening and has been here for the whole time has gained a positive resonance with the things that we were saying, and that there's some food. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. And I do look forward to the next spaces. Good night.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day. We're gonna do more of these. We're gonna try to make them more structured, like what we're gonna talk about, and stuff like that. Um, just great. It's a sort of a decision to collect like-minded people and just share beautiful things. We feel that there is a deficit, a very clear deficit in the world, and sort of like we intuitively know sort of like what's coming as well, and the amount of confusion and perhaps even darkness, that a lot of people have to contend with. We want to create a space where the only its only purpose is beauty, right? The sharing of beauty, the sharing of knowledge, the sharing of this and that. There are no rules. I think that I will create a community for it, and you guys can join if you'd like. Um, and the purpose of it, just share things in it that you find beautiful, and we will sort of like harmonize around, certain maybe like concepts or ideas or art forms, whatever. We'll see how it goes, right? You want to let these things grow, a little bit on their own. So yeah, hopefully on the next one, you know some of you will engage in conversation with us as well. That would be cool. So thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.